My son-in-law's medical unit is getting called. Or already going.
My neighbor's,
All right, you're live.
He's with the Army.
I keep showing my big butt. I'm getting a little tired of that.
I know. I was looking at that, I was like.
It's got to coordinate it.
They said
We're live, but we lost land.
Says
Canal.
one. That might be Becky.
Yeah, they do, once a month they do it all. We don't. Just, you know, we're all there. Wine, sure.
Let me get that large screen, but I can't.
Come back, we'll set the porch and drink some wine.
The
Do you like my new shorts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got 4 pairs of the same exact shirt. So you got 3 shirts.
There you go.
I bought them in Belks and they're like $60 shorts for like $12.
Belk has always got stuff on
Oh
sale.
my God. Leave your eyes on stuff.
You can't walk into Belk and buy one of anything.
You know, it's funny, Lisa had never been in a Belk store until we came down here. And so she opens the account there and they got the Belk bucks and they got all the other stuff. And she's like, oh man, this is really I had a Belk card. I was actually on an airplane with one of the Belks.
We're good?
Oh, really?
Yeah, we exchanged cards and he sent me a $1,000 card.
I've never been to
Okay.
one. I've never been to one tunnel station here the first time in the 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, Deb said we're broadcasting, are we all ready? All right, so I'm gonna call us back to order. We are now through our technical difficulties in broadcasting. So we're going to move into the agenda topic that is the CAMA land use plan. And I'm gonna ask Ms. Hill and Mr. Holland to take us through the discussion on it. Is that how you wanted to run through this, Deb, or do you want to open it to board members for questions?
I can turn it over to Landon. Are you prepared for that, Landon? I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Landon. There you
I
go.
apologize. I think the intent of today's meeting was to allow, to bring everyone together after having an opportunity to review the draft, and basically discuss any concerns or comments. We can't hold a public hearing on the plan until the camera review is completed. So we are not in a position to adopt it, but what we would like to do is make sure that when that time comes, we are prepared to move forward with a public hearing. We did get a recommendation from the planning board to forward this document on to you all for that consideration. And currently, CAMA is conducting their consistency review. And I know that they are into the review, but I can't say for certain when that will be completed. So I guess Deb and I talked about the structure of the meeting essentially being an open discussion about concerns or comments on this final draft.
And
So I will turn it over to you all. I don't know how we will go about that other than to just allow each board member to weigh in, or we can move through it section by section. I'll leave that up to Deb.
so what I would like to suggest is, first of all, I want to thank you all and the planning board for all the work that went into the CAMA land use plan. It sounds like it's been approved by the planning board to be able to come to us.
Recommended.
Okay, but
Recommended
they're
approval
comfortable
to you,
with it,
yes.
okay. So then what I would suggest, I think, is if we just go around to each board member and see if we've got questions or concerns. Does that sound sufficient, Lisa? Okay, so Mr. Peters, I'm gonna start with you. Do you have any questions or concerns on the CAMA land use plan?
Well, I note that Alderman Benson has submitted numerous recommendations and additional information that he is concerned with. So I think we need to recognize that first and have some approach to all of Mike's comments as far as we want to deal with them.
Well, my only concern with that is I couldn't, and we'll get to Mr. Benson, he gets his turn too, but I couldn't tell from that document, it looked like they were embedded there. So I don't really know what the changes were.
Well, that's a good point.
So will Michael when we get around to him, I'm assuming Mike will walk us through some of his questions and changes.
Just
Yes.
quick question. Actually, I was gonna say that Mike should go first, but putting that aside for a second, one of my questions was, can we have them reconcile, I mean, we've got Mike's comments and we've got the plan, and I haven't seen, we just sent them in. A kind of a reconciliation, like, if he says A and they're saying, well, A is because of this, I mean, that would help me a lot to be able to reconcile what Mike's put in there and what they've put in there. If we call them like a red line document that compares, because he might say, well, this is a typo, that's not material, but if this is a material change, then I'd like to see what the reaction was of the people that put it together.
Well, perhaps along that same line of thinking, perhaps if Mike would have provided us with a summary of his changes in the text of his email, rather than just dumping a however many pages document, 126 page document with embedded changes, we could have gone through and compared them to the original a little more easily. Frankly, when I saw that email and that document, and I scrolled through it to see how the changes were made, I'd already read this document once. And because of the legality of the document and the necessity and the purpose it serves, it's a hard read. It's not hard, Landon, because of what you've done. It's difficult. It's a lot of process to read when you sit down and read it. But honestly, I wasn't going to go back through the whole thing a second time to find one board member's changes, when what he should have done is, if you want us to do that, provide us with a summary of changes up front in the text of his email.
So why don't I'm still gonna suggest that we continue around just to see if anybody had any questions or concerns. And then like when we get to you, I'm sure that you'll be able to provide us some information. Yes, Mr.
Just one thing is kind of a summary of what they just talked about. I don't mean to put words in Mike's. My guess is that Mike would be willing to sit down with people that put the plan together and go through those comments and get a reconciliation, but that's up to him.
Well, why don't we continue around, and then Mr. Benson can.
I'll go with.
Okay. All right, Ms. Meyer, did you have any questions or concerns?
Well, I didn't really have any concerns about it. I found a couple of typos, and I'm actually trying to find.
Well, for typos, I think we could probably just get those over to Ms. Hill.
That, I mean, and I only found two. I think that's.
And out of all of this, two is okay.
Yeah, but I don't know whether I actually read every single word.
You fell asleep and halfway through.
Well, no, but I kind of skimmed some things.
Okay. And then Mr. Leonard, I know you spent some time going through this as well.
Yes, I had just very, very few and minor changes. On page 1-5, where we talk about the history of the island, I would like to have seen, maybe we could add a sentence or two in there to recognize, post-World War II, Ocean City. Okay,
That's a good one.
just a couple sentences, and then there were a couple, let's see.
You got that, Landon?
What was post-World War II, what? I didn't get it.
Ocean City.
Okay, gotcha.
Just the addition in the history portion of some recognition of Ocean City as how it developed the island. Labor force, section 2, page 2-9, we talk about travel time to work and labor force, and we don't mention anything about the world's most complete amphibious training base. That's our neighbor, Camp Lejeune. Let's see, one more I have. No, that was it. That was all I had. I thought overall, it was a fine product, and it was a real good effort. And I know it took a lot of people a lot of work to get it where it is, including the planning board. And I know I attended one of the citizen meetings we had way back in the day up at the warehouse. And I think that going through the citizen comments, there's a lot of effort put in here by a lot of people, planning, planning board, and our citizens. And I think it's a good document.
And, Mr. Benson, you said you want to go last? Mr. Gray?
It's the first time I've been through one of these things, and full disclosure, I hadn't gone through because I was tied up in something all day yesterday to go back and forth between what Mr. Benson had put in here and what this thing was. But for somebody who had not been through one of these before, I found it very informative. I liked the way it was written. I thought that, for somebody that even, maybe even coming to the town, the history and stuff, I like the additions that Tom talked about. So, it's pretty amazing document to put something together like this, so. Nice job. And Len.
I will say the one thing, I know that we've got some new board members, and so, a couple of years ago, the land use plans were just a guide, and they set up on the shelves, most planners' shelves, and collected dust until somebody prompted them to update it again. There's been recent North Carolina general statute legislation that requires in a lot of the decisions that you make that there's a justification comment on whether or not your decision is supported by the land use plan or not. It doesn't mean that you're always bound by it, but it does mean that you are it has to be stated whether or not it's consistent. And if you've departed, what circumstances have brought you to depart from that policy statement that's in the land use plan. The other thing is that Campbell land use plan for 22 local governments, I think it is, 20 or 22, it's a nice round number. On the coast of North Carolina, the policy statements are as enforceable as the Unified Development Ordinance. So if in the Campbell land use plan it says if there is a policy statement, for example, and this is a hypothetical, don't go anywhere yet, that all houses shall be painted blue, then that's enforceable in inspections in the planning department through zoning.
What shade of blue? So sky blue, light blue,
Right.
navy blue, royal blue,
It's actually
navy blue?
It's actually dolphin blue, so we don't have to repaint our house.
That's
Can I jump in and say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
Going through this last night, one of the things that really jumped out to me is that, when we get a board packet and it has something in it that we're gonna act upon, and you get the background from Deb and everything, I hope I remember, and I think I will, what does the land use plan say?
Well, Deb usually puts that in her
I
summary.
know, but I think in my mind, what I want to remember as we make decisions going forward is, I know I remember reading about that in the land use plan. I need to go back to the book, and that's why mine's in a binder.
right.
And, and go back and see what the land use plan says and read it in context for myself,
Absolutely.
And
And I have
it's a good piece of humor, it really is.
I have that as a statement in my staff report templates. And so that helps to remind me whenever I get to that point to go and actually look what the Campbell land use plan says to where that I can put that in there. But if at any point in time that you don't see that, that's really a good catch. And certainly if we ever had a case that had to go to court and you had stated in there that it was consistent, that your decision was consistent with the Campbell land use plan, that fortifies your decision. So just something to keep in mind. So it's good that we state it, we put it in writing.
And we have a reference document to be able to go back to, as Tom had mentioned, just for some additional refresher education, so that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Mr. Benson, you're up.
I'd like to echo what my colleagues have said. Deb and Landon, you've done a great job putting the land use plan together, planning board. It's unfortunate that our statistics on the town parameters are gonna be 10 years old by the time the update's approved, and we're just having the census, the 2020 census now. it'd be really nice if, when those figures come out, that we could update. And I know you can't amend the plan year, we'd update those statistics to have, the current statistics in the plan once the 2020 census data becomes available. So I think that would be a thing to think about for the future with the plan. I have two areas of concern with the plan. Number one, I think that the plan needs to recognize the importance of land use policies and coastal resilience. Coastal resilience is kind of a new buzzword for me. It's something that the state Division of Coastal Management is emphasizing in their activities, and coastal resilience means different things, different people. The definition's not well defined, but basically it says that when you have some sort of infrastructure or you have a plan, the plan is such that you are able as a community to recover better from a natural disaster than if you had not gone ahead with coastal resiliency concepts in your planning work, okay? Exactly what those coastal resilience things are, that's where the discussion is, but like strengthening the dunes, like requiring fortified roofs, things like this, things that are going to improve recovery or result in less damage really during a major disaster. And I don't know, Landon, if coastal resiliency is something that the other communities where you worked on land use plan updates, is this something that you're doing now for other communities? And do you think that we shouldn't maybe have at least an introduction, just a reference to coastal resiliency and how it affects our plan?
Pleasure of the board, I would, I'd be more than happy to add in a brief section on resiliency and trying to work it into the policy and implementation strategies of the plan.
Yeah, I think it would go in the introduction quite well, just, a paragraph, just acknowledge it. The other concern that I have with the land use plan is strengthening the plan for conservation. I don't think current land use plan is very strong on conservation, and I'm talking conservation of the coastal wetlands, which make up a vast majority of our town's area. I think we need some policy statements in our plan that would give stronger statement about conservation of our coastal wetlands. I don't know how other board members feel, but I feel it's very important to protect the coastal wetlands in town. And anything we can do in terms of a policy to protect those coastal wetlands, we should be doing.
Well, we already have a conservation policy.
We have a conservation district through zoning, but the conservation district and the wetland delineations are not necessarily, they do not necessarily mirror each other. Wetlands is regulated by either the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for 404, and then 401 is regulated by Division of Coastal Management.
So are you suggesting, so what we've done as a board in the past, Mike, is where other government agencies such as CAMA enforce, that we have deferred to them for their judgment and been supportive of it? Are you saying that?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the Conservation Deed District is a policy that the board adopted in the past, not to rezone Con D land, right?
And that's it.
There are five seats for Alderman coming up in the 2021 election. It would only take 3 members of those 5 people coming on the board to decide that the zoning of Con D could be changed in some way that would lessen the ability to preserve and conserve that land. So that's, my point is, we need some additional conservation policies in our plan to augment that one policy, I think it's policy 17, that we're not going to,
Can I ask you a
reserve
question?
con- okay.
So what I think I hear you saying, for purposes of discussion, is you want something in the land use plan, Campbell land use plan, that strengthens our conservation district designations to the extent that a future board potentially couldn't come in and undo the policies, procedures that are in place now. Is that correct?
There would be additional policies they would have to change to affect that.
So this would strengthen our policy, our conservation related policies. Is that something that with, an additional paragraph or several sentences could be added to this document? I'm asking Deb and I'm asking Landon, because if that is the case, my suggestion would be that Alderman Benson goes ahead and drafts that, if that's acceptable to the planning director, Mr.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt, but it's already in here. I've already done that.
But we had a hard time trying
Okay.
to.
Can I share my screen?
Unless you want me to have a heart attack and lose my mind and walk out the door now.
All right.
Case,
I'll just,
before you leave that, Mike, can I ask a quick question? I have no issues about strengthening conservation stuff, but if we're gonna do something like that, I would like some guidance from some kind of council, that we're not confiscating people's property.
Alright,
I understand there's a
100%.
balance.
right.
And I just don't wanna have somebody come back and challenge us and say,
We're not doing that. We've already been there. We've had that discussion with the COVID thing. We
I-
already know that's a place we're not going. We're not imposing anything on any property.
I'm not sure that we have finished that discussion, Mr. Benson, with our attorney. So, I'm fine with looking at whatever conservation language that you want to draft up and possibly include. But I share Mr. Grant's, comments. My biggest concern is that we're not overstepping or interfering with somebody's property rights.
and then one other thing before you leave that. The other thing I'm concerned about the council needs to address too is, I'm not sure that we wanna be on the record as saying we wanna tie the hands of future aldermen.
I don't need to do that.
In some way to create those, it's almost like a poison pill.
Yeah,
In the corporate world, and I'm not really comfortable. Look, I'm all for what he's talking about, if we do it the correct way. Okay, but putting in poison pills and doing stuff like that ends up being bad public policy, in my opinion, so.
I'm not suggesting that.
I just had one
Mike,
comment.
I just say that we're tying this stuff back.
Mike, I clicked on yours, and the one he sent, he highlights in yellow, and then there's a little bubble up above it. And
No, I
if
didn't
you,
see that.
if you click on it, it explains, well, it shows what the changes are that he wants to make. And I can't remember, but there were a couple of them that seemed pretty restrictive. And it seemed to tie our hands more than it would be necessary to, in my opinion.
Well, let's be specifics.
Well, I can't remember which one, because I got it yesterday.
They're only embedded in a 126-page document. Well,
If you set your computer, if you have Adobe Reader, and
I
you
don't
set
on my
your
laptop.
computer to comments, the comments will show up in the right-hand panel. And when you click on that comment, it will take you to that place in the 15-page document where the comment was made.
I just put an email with a summary of changes, and nothing else, just page numbers. I'm not gonna
Comment was
sift
made.
through this whole thing all day to find your comments.
Well, I'm
It's
just,
not fair, and it's not, you shouldn't expect other people to have to do that, okay? You shouldn't.
okay, so everybody, first of all, let's just regroup for a minute. Mr. Benson, I don't have Adobe on my laptop, which is why I had a hard time seeing what your changes were. I may on my work computer, so I will look there.
All right.
But I mean, I haven't been able to tell what they are.
Lots of changes are little things, but let's look, take your printout, you look at map 11A, page 4-4. Page 4B, in your printout, we'll go through this with the printout, it's simple. I'll use my computer to keep my place, you'll use the printout, okay?
Yes.
4-4. With me, Tom?
Yep.
4-4. All right. Deb, the way the maps are made, it appears that we are going to, let's just take map 11B.
Can you hear me all right?
Hang on, I'm pulling it up.
And I don't believe we've made any change. So first of all, I want to just, for point of clarification, Landon, if you can hear me, these maps that we're talking about in like map 11, A, B, and all those, I don't believe we changed those in this version of the land use plan. Did we do that?
I believe that is correct.
Right, okay, so I just wanted to just set the stage that this is not new information, this has been here.
But what it implies, let's look at 11B.
Mr. Benson, when you're talking, if you could direct your voice
11.
to that microphone so that Landon can hear you.
Okay, 11B, you look at 11B, very north end, that map indicates that our future land use plan is to fill in that marshland and build single-family homes. Do you agree with me? That's why the
No.
map is laid.
No, because this is not a zoning, now, this is just telling
It
you,
says
it's,
low density residential.
but again, and I could be wrong, Ms. Hill and Landon, but if that's wetlands, there's going to be other people that are gonna tell you what you are restricted from doing there.
But my point is, if somebody looks at this map, it assumes that the town plans to, in the future, fill in coastal wetlands and build single-family houses. My only point is, Landon, can you, or
Clarify it.
can you put another GIS layer on this map to designate what is actually single-family residential and what is Con-D, conservation areas, so people don't get the wrong impression that we're filling in wetlands.
But we're, so
How
the,
does this coincide with the zoning map? I don't think we have.
so I guess my other concern though is wetlands, the GIS gets updated with wetland information on a regular basis, correct?
GIS actually does not, they go by the layer,
60,
they go by
60.
the shape files from Gamer.
But I guess my
But it
point
doesn't
is,
mean that there was an actual delineation done,
understand,
signature.
but I guess I'm concerned about taking the document too far, is all I'm concerned about doing.
All right, let's
Because-
move on to 4. Page
And Landon,
4.8.
Landon, to answer your question, we did bounce do you remember, we did bounce the current zoning map with the,
Yeah.
For property-
exactly.
and we went through there and bounced that with the future land use plan.
The future land use map serves as that foundation for that zoning map, so those low density residential parcels are zoned low density residential. So making them conservation, would essentially insinuate that we had an intent to rezone those properties.
To rezone it to conservation though.
Exactly, and if they're not conservation now, it's not our,
They are conservation now, that's my point. I just want the conservation D areas marked on this map so people that don't know our town, like the people that are reviewing the plan, say, oh, well, their future plan is to fill their,
but Mike, they do have conservation on this in a light green. It's on here. So that yellow area, I mean, we could pull up the GIS, I didn't bring my laptop today.
I can
That
probably tell
may
you by
not
looking at it.
be, that's like, I think it's It's all at the very north end. That may not actually legally be zoned.
That's actually got an R10, I wanna say it's an R10 or an R20 pocket on it.
Right. So we can't officially just change that to Condi with the land use plan.
It's not already Condi?
No,
No, it's not. There's two pockets up there.
there's not, it's not.
And they've been that way since like 1984.
Okay, well, you see my point. I'm trying to protect coastal wetlands with my, comments, and I look out my back porch and I see that area that's marked in yellow there where the, access is to the inlet. I'm thinking that should stay a wetland area, and my maps tell me that could be developed someday. And I
But
could see
Mr.
a bunch
Benson,
of
it's-
houses out there.
But Mr. Benson, this goes back to what I was saying before, that wetlands is not synonymous with conservation district. And back prior to, I wanna say it was 2006, between 2000 and 2006, because when you bring up the question of what is wetlands, it was cheaper, easier for, back before GIS and all the slick tools that we have today. And that's why you see a lot of residentially zoned property, and then property in behind it is conservation district. So when you as a property owner would come in and you would provide your plat where your surveyor actually went out on the ground to determine the classification, water, plants, et cetera, that here's your wetland delineation line, that what was in the wetlands was in fact conservation district. And so Condi at that time was basically a floating overlay. Well, sometime around 2004, plus or minus 2 years prior to me getting here, that conservation district got nailed down, right? So there are properties that are in the wetlands that are not in the conservation district. And there are also uplands that would otherwise be developable that's in the conservation
Should
district.
be right in the middle of the lot. I mean,
That's what I was talking about with the board elections.
So, and Landon, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are the only local government in North Carolina that prohibits the rezoning of conservation district, right?
I'm aware of, yes.
Yeah. So that's yet to be challenged, but when it comes to the wetlands, and I appreciate the fact that you care about preserving the wetlands, as I do with the outstanding resource water classification as well as the wetlands. The Division of Coastal Management is the permitting authority for the 401, and the federal government, Army Corps of Engineers, is the permitting authority for the 404. And so with them being, with the state and with the federal government being the permitting authority for either of the wetlands, I don't think it means that we are less conservative. And I don't think it's fair to say that Division of Coastal Management and Army Corps of Engineers is not supportive of protecting the environment either. And so when you go a step further and you say, well, I want to nail this down in perpetuity to where that nobody ever changes it. I think it was in 2007 that we had some difficulty with various legal issues and insurance and yada, yada, yada. So if it's something, certainly if you feel strong enough about something that you're willing to fight in court over, then that's one thing. But I think that there's also a reasonableness in allowing people to develop their property, that is not only zoned property properly, but it's supported by that CAMA land use plan, particularly future land use map, as far as any decisions and any permits that they would have had to have gone through and obtained from either the state or from the Army Corps of Engineers.
and I think if you go through that process one time, you will see that they certainly are not just handing out permits for anybody to develop anywhere. There are very many rules and regulations about a parcel that has any wetlands on it at all. What, you know, what you can and what you can't do, so.
And anytime the Corps is involved, then that ups the camel permit, it's no longer a minor permit, now it ups it to a major permit, or even a general.
So it seems like, we all agree that we want to protect the coastal wetlands best we can. Let's move on.
Well, but wait, I would also say that I personally, and I'm not gonna speak for everybody else, but I'm not personally advocating for any changes to how we discuss conservation in here, based on that conversation we just had.
I'll give you some specific things to react to then. Can we move on to page 4-8? I think we need to update this section on the multi-use path. This old information that's here. It doesn't reflect the 2016 study that the board commissioned with the group out of Raleigh to design the multi-use path going from Town Park up to the New River Inlet. The three slices that are of the path pictured here, first of all, the slices are out of focus, even if you magnify it greatly. I'm not sure what these maps are supposed to imply, but to me, when I first saw it, it implied that if you put that text, the town maintains a multi-use path intended for both walking and biking, which serves the northern portion of the island. I kind of assume from the text that we have a multi-use path in place right now.
We do on Island Drive. We have a bike path on Island Drive. So again, I would not advocate to change this. We have that strip on Island Drive where folks can ride their bike. And we had actually.
Up to Town Park on New River Inlet Road as well.
So the reason I would advocate not changing this is there's not been a board decision one way or the other on how to accomplish that same type of safety path, I'm gonna call the safety path, on New River Inlet Road. We don't have the funds right now to afford the one that we've had drawn up. Mr. Tooman and Mr. Leonard had spoken to the DOT about possibly widening one of the shoulders so we'd at least have that on New River Inlet Road. So I think that you're looking for busy work on that page, to be
No,
honest.
I'm not. I'm saying on this page, it incorrectly shows that we already have a bike path in place.
We do on Island Drive.
No, this map here, Joanne, the first segment there.
I read it that it's showing where it could possibly
It's the same
go.
regions. It's the
It's
same.
showing where it could possibly go, not in place.
No,
Recommended.
Recommended.
it's not showing that. If you magnify the image on your computer, you will not see a bike path proposed.
Landon, could you explain that?
I think that I was looking at something, I was gonna recommend that we could try and certainly get better quality images in here, because I think we have better, clarity on the maps, diagrams. It does show proposed and existing, things like that, at least on the bottom three. The one on the top, obviously, that is a needs for the DOT.
Yeah, that's a DOT map. The maps on the bottom, I thought we got that from Kimley Horn, from their shape files, from the map that they did.
No, these were in the actual plan, so these were put out of the planning, or I forget exactly where, but they were taken from the actual work.
That's Kimley Horn, that's what I'm saying, they're Kimley Horn's plan, so if you wanted to sharpen them or be able to provide a larger map, we can get the shape files to kind of bring that up.
Yeah, so Deb and I can get with Kimley Horn and improve quality, certainly.
And so the text should say, Landon, that this is the proposed route. The text implies that we already have that multi-use path.
Wouldn't it just say existing and proposed?
Yeah.
Since you already have a piece.
Right, I mean, it just needs to be clarified what these maps are. They're the proposed route, right?
But we do have a route already today.
From town hall to town park.
No, from town hall down towards Surf City.
I'm not talking, this
That's
section
town
right
park.
here is not
That's
talking about
town park.
Island Drive, Joanne, it's talking
Oh.
about the northern part of the island.
When I read the northern part of the island, I'm thinking all of North Topsail
Oh.
Beach, because
Mhm.
it's Topsail Island.
Oh.
We are the northern part. So that's what I'm saying is I think that, again, I don't even believe that this changed from the last iteration. So
It does
I
not.
think I'm fine with the discussion, Mike, but we're really diving into the weeds.
Let's just put the report that we got from Kimberly Horn in here to indicate that we have a proposal.
I'm not comfortable doing that because we haven't decided as a board to move forward
This is
with that proposal.
This is a future land use plan, we don't have the money to do anything in here. It's a future land use plan.
I'm not comfortable putting that in, personally. I don't know how the other board members feel, but, we have not done anything with that bike path.
Well, then we shouldn't have proposed maps in there.
But what
Take out
we
the
have, I'm fine with having the maps here because we do have the goal and desire to have some type of a bike path going up the island. Whether it's an expanded shoulder from the DOT or whether it's a multi-use path that we would love to be able to invest in, one or the other will be there someday, and that's what it's saying.
That's what, no, it's not.
That's how
what
I read it.
But I agree 100% with you, and that's what I'm saying.
I'm saying if you want to clarify the photos, that's fine, but I wouldn't change anything else. I think, I'm interpreting it different than you.
But don't you want to admit that the town spent some money on a proposed?
The town spent some money on the maps, and I believe it was like $16,000
Right.
for the development of the bike path, which was a requirement of applying for the STIP. The project did not score well with the STIP, it was over
No,
$8
it
million.
Right,
So
we
it's-
know all that. We
it's-
know that.
Okay, well,
I'm just saying, don't we want to admit that we did this or not?
I'm fine, Mr. Benson, but I was trying to explain for everybody else that may not have been familiar with it. And so where we're at today, yes, we did spend money on the development of plans, but also keep in mind that part of the requirement, you gotta pay to play. So development of those plans was a requirement of submitting for the project for STIP for NCDOT funding, which it was turned down.
Shib, in that context, do we have any idea what it would take to move us up on the DOT scaling or rating?
One of the things that we are working on, and I think it's been discussed briefly in the past, and I think COVID's probably slowed us down on this, is previously the town participated with the Down East Rural Transportation Planning Organization. And so we are looking at joining Jacksonville and Onslow County in the MPO. And hopefully participation in the MPO might be able to provide more support with NCDOT. We don't know that, but that's the intent. So, but an $8 million project is still an $8 million project. And the reason why that costs, why you're spending $8 million for 4 miles of bike path is because of the bridge crossovers. And when you take NCDOT's money, you have to engineer, some would even say over-engineer, everything to NCDOT standards. And that is what specifically has driven the cost of that project up.
Okay, can we move on? Let's go to page 415. Inlet Hazard Residential District. I think everybody's aware that CRC has been given a recommendation to change update the inlet hazard areas. And the only reason I want to mention that is that process has been delayed due to the virus and the lack of the CRC being able to have in-person meetings right now. But eventually, I think they're going to change some of the inlet hazard area. And the rules for setback will be based on inlet hazard erosion rates rather than on the ocean erosion rate.
But
So
it's
we're
still
just gonna
proposed.
need to update
I
this.
don't, Mike, again, I don't agree, because that's the proposed inlet hazard area. It's not, it hasn't changed the way we permit or zone today.
I'm not saying that we should change anything in here
I
right
don't even
now.
think
I'm
we should
just
talk about it.
alerting us to the fact that when the rules change, we're going
And then we would do an update, right?
to update.
It would take,
that section.
whether you did an update or not, it would take precedence over what was on the land use plan.
Right.
So,
Because that would be
I'm
the
just
new
pointing
zoning
that out.
rules.
right.
On page 5.1, goals and implementation strategies. I think we should add to that bullet list coastal resiliency.
Which page is that?
It's page 5.1, Landon, it's the first section of the goals and implementing strategies. You got bullets for, and I think this concept comes here with those bullets, coastal resiliency.
Ms. Meyer?
In the back of this proposal has, definitions.
Mhm.
What is gonna be your definition for coastal resiliency? As far as I know, there isn't one definition, right?
Well, we would use the definition that DMC has on our website.
Which is,
I don't know it word for word, but
well,
basically,
I
it's the
mean,
ability to recover from natural
right,
disasters.
right, I get that, and I've seen all through here where they say all rebuild should have, steps to take that will, lessen the issue if we have another hurricane.
Well, we've got to bring, if you touch it, it's got to come up to code.
Right, so it's already covered, I think.
I do too. We already have high impact glass over a certain story. I mean, we've got those. I feel like we're overstepping into the zoning and building arena that is already covered.
Micromanaging,
That's just my thoughts on it.
mine too.
All right, let's move on. There are some places in the plan where we say we are supporting one thing, and then later on, we say we are opposed to such and such. And it's just a contradiction of ideas because they come up in different places. And here I want to give you an example on page 5-7. Policy number 6. We don't support development of marinas or public boat ramp facilities within town. All right. Later on in the document, it says we support access to estuarine areas, improving access for public to estuarine areas. So we're saying that we could have boat ramps in other parts of the towns to support the ability of the public to access intercoastal waters. So my comment here is, I think we should delete for public boat ramp facilities because we have a beautifully rebuilt one under the high-rise bridge. And to say we're not supporting that facility, I think is wrong. So I would just say we don't support development of marinas, but let's take out boat ramp facilities.
Where it says the public boat ramp facilities, this might be something that you might want to think about. I don't think the two statements that you read are incongruous with each other. When you talk about providing access to the estuary, there could be a public boardwalk that reaches out, that provides access. without necessarily allowing for the construction of a, boat marina, public boat marina that comes in. We do have the one marina that I think it's, North Carolina Wildlife
Under the bridge.
maintains.
Under the bridge.
That's under the bridge. And to say that you don't support the construction of a marina or a public boat dock does not mean that you don't support the, boat landing, the boat landing that's underneath the bridge currently.
Well-
I think that those are two statements. I would be very concerned, and this is, and I'll throw this out to you, this is why I'd like for you to think about it, is I've always been very concerned about the proposal of marinas they have in public boat launches, et cetera, other than the one that we have on the bridge. They have been brought up over the past few years. I would like for you to keep in mind the quality of the water that's classified by the state as outstanding resource water. So when you start allowing public boat marinas and boat docks and fueling and everything else in that outstanding resource water, I would anticipate that there would be a decline in that quality. And once you lose it, it will never come back.
I'm not suggesting that at all, Deb. I'm suggesting here for the text that we just strike public boat ramp facilities. Since we already have a beautiful one under the bridge, we're saying we don't support that facility under the bridge.
It's not our facility.
So why don't you say,
Name our
why don't you just
facility.
amend it to say
Additional.
new or additional, new construction?
Well, we're not gonna support marinas at all. At least I sure wouldn't.
Well,
support
I mean,
marinas.
So
right?
Nothing's
So I
coming
don't
in
think-
front of us to even ask
But
us
if
for
there
board
were a
support, so.
proposal to put in say the Division of Wildlife proposes to put in a boat ramp, launch facility down there at the county beach access, on Island Drive, would we be opposed to a boat ramp there? I'm not talking about marinas, I'm just talking about being able to launch your boat public. Right now, there's only one place where the sole
The
surrounding.
county does,
It's an editorial thing to me.
I don't think I think it's an actual, I think it's more than editorial. I mean, I personally think it's more than editorial. And I think if somebody was wanting to put in another kayak launch or a boat launch, and it came through the board, that the board should have the right to vote on that based on their decision.
It's one's motorized and one isn't.
There were several lakes up in Pennsylvania where I was, I mean, they were non-motorized. I mean, so there are things, I'm just saying, we should have the opportunity to be able to consider. This is a guide, I view this as a guide for us,
The
right?
policy statements are enforceable.
Well, I understand, but that doesn't mean if it's a non-motorized boat that we couldn't consider a ramp, right? Right or wrong?
I would say it would be, being the one that has to filter through the definitions, I would have to go through what somebody was proposing, and the definitions that we have to be able to answer that question. I'm not prepared to do that.
No, it's okay.
With my little brain today.
We just kind of look at the discussion though. I thought all he's talking about, you know, and to your point, Mayor, we can consider a non-motorized one. This basically says we don't support any, and if it's enforceable, then his point's well taken, and maybe we ought to just delete that section. Right? Completely, I don't think we're, you know, because I don't think it takes the right for us, if this is enforceable, we don't support them, then to, whichever one you guys made the comment about, they want to put a kayak, place in, are we not going to support somebody putting in a place to put kayaks out? I don't know, I think it depends.
Well, a kayak launch is not the same as a marina, of course, so it goes to the definitions. But I think with this causing as much confusion as what it is, I think that probably Landon and I need to go back and take a look at how that could be better worded.
Perfect.
Because I don't think any of us are arguing with each other, but we certainly seem to be beating a dead horse to that. So
Or
I
we can
think
spend
that-
another half an hour talking about it and come back to the same thing you just recommended.
Thank you.
Okay, so move on. Let's go to page 5-9. Policy residentials. Policy 8. The town discourages rezoning of existing residential developed or zone areas for commercial land use classification. This is one of those places where we are contradictory in our policies, because earlier we say we support modest commercial development. I'm just pointing that out.
I'm sorry, Mike, which page?
Which page is it?
I'm on page 5.9.
Well, what this statement says to me though is we discourage reclassification of residential to commercial. However, we do have several commercial plots in North Topsail Beach that are undeveloped.
We do.
So if somebody wanted to come in and develop something that's a commercial business, then they would need to select from those parcels that are available. That's what this bullet is saying. Now, if the board has an issue with that, then we can discuss that, but that's really what it's saying.
And again, I don't see the incongruity in those two statements.
Okay, I just pointed out, let's go on to policy 10, same page. Town does not encourage the development of high-density multifamily housing complexes. So we're saying no more condos. Right?
I don't know that we
Condo
even
project.
have any parcels large enough for like you're saying for like a St. Regis and actually I don't even know that they meet the setbacks to build.
I do think that it is possible to have a development, a condo development. Of course, condo goes, in North Carolina, it goes to the definition of ownership.
Right.
But for the sake of argument, what we traditionally think of condos like St. Regis, St. Moritz, Villa Capriani, the one cap on that is that they would have to meet the 48-foot building
Setback.
height. So
And
you're
the
not,
setbacks too, right?
say again?
And if it's over 5,000 square feet, they'd have to meet the specific setback from the ocean.
Right, they'd have to meet the camera requirements. But any development like that's going to come before the planning board for a recommendation and for the board of aldermen for approval or denial. So, but as it is, you're not ever gonna see another St. Regis or St. Moritz unless you change the building height.
It also says it does not encourage the development. It doesn't say they're not gonna allow it.
They prohibit it.
I'm just raising the point. Let's go on to policy 11.
To what end on these points? I mean, we're spending a lot of time here, we're not doing
Okay,
it.
well, that one I didn't need to bring up. Let's do that, policy 11. I just don't understand.
I have 12 marked, but I don't have 11 marked from you. Did you mark it?
I have a question about septic tanks and dead left, so.
What's your question about septic tanks?
Do we encourage that or even allow it?
Well, okay, so Flores is not everywhere in North Topsail Beach.
Okay,
So if that home doesn't have access to sewer,
okay,
then we are going to have to allow some type of approved septic design.
okay.
Do we have septics on the island?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah.
That-
Where they
house
more
that
towards
went
the
in
Surf City, or they?
No, they're
That big house
trying
right
to
down
everywhere.
by the brass pelican that went in there, it's got a septic system.
Yeah, on
Having dealt with
those,
those, I will never have a house.
on those ones, those lots right across from the brass on the sound side, they don't have access to the sewer. So they have septic.
Okay.
Where's that you in?
Near the brass pelican across the street, those, I can't remember what it's.
It's where, Sue lives.
Yes, those houses. I just can't, I'm drawing a blank on them.
All right, so let's go to policy. I want-
Yes.
Stop
Like-
on it, yeah.
We need to keep going, guys. Sorry,
Let's look at policy number 12. I would like to add a new policy that goes along with that. The new policy would read, the town promotes incorporation of drainage swales along thoroughfares anytime that the right-of-way is affected by construction or utility work. A good example of what I'm talking about is Town Park. Contractor graded that right-of-way area to develop a small depression The rainwater collects in there until it percolates down to the soil profile. I think that should be a policy throughout the town. Anytime that right of way is disturbed for whatever reason, that when it's put back with a swale to take storm water off of the streets.
But when they develop, or when they build a house, there's stormwater management, I mean, that's all taken into consideration into what they get approved. As a good example is the concrete, whether it's pervious or impervious for the driveway. So I'm not trying to be difficult, but I really feel that we are going too far with this document because those are in the building codes and again, what county will allow and not allow as far as how much you've used on your lot and how your drainage has to function.
No, I'm not advocating that at all, Joanne. This has nothing to do with building lots. This is the right of way along the thoroughfares of town. All right? And if we're gonna support vegetative buffers along the thoroughfares, why aren't we gonna support draining stormwater away from the road? This is just in the right of way. That's all, the right of way.
Like what we did with the parking, the extra parking spaces at, the one we had the special meeting for,
At Rogers Bay.
at Rogers Bay. We didn't talk about
We didn't
the
have. that for the
drainage, we just talked about the
Vegetation.
the vegetation.
Right. But
So-
see, the HEP project, the right of way wasn't affected, so there was no reason to think about putting on private property.
Yeah, I thought they had to build a special right of way.
No, they have to, well, they have new entrance.
How many more of these you got?
We got a lot, Tom. I mean, I've been waiting for a year. I've tried to get all of these things into the planning board when they were meeting and developing this. And I was sitting in the row behind the former mayor who described to the planning board what he wanted to see in the land use plan. And I got home from that meeting, I got what I would call an ugly email from him and said, let the planning board do their work. You'll have your chance when it comes to the Board of Aldermen. So Tom, this is my chance, you just have to bear with me.
Well, you need to speed it up, okay?
Okay,
You need to speed it up. I'm not spending the whole day listening to you pontificate and tear apart what's a pretty darn good piece of work. Now, I don't know if you're doing this for attention or what the deal is, but we've wandered through this and so far we've made no substantive changes. We've come to no agreements. I don't know what your goal is here. I don't know what your aim is here, but I'm beginning to feel like it's not really a good use of time. Planning director's already left. I'm not sure why. Let's get moving and let's get this done.
do you accept new policy 12A? The town promotes incorporation of drainage swells along thoroughfares any time that right of way is affected.
I would like to know what the planning board feels about that.
Well, see, I wasn't given a chance to ask the planning board. I was told to stay out of their business and let them do their work. So
But Deb is able to bring it
now
back through the
my
planning.
opportunity.
Deb is able to bring that suggestion through the planning board, and I would be supportive of their recommendation back to us.
I've had about enough of the passive aggressive school teacher.
Here's that.
Sorry, 2.5 hours I needed to break.
Not a
Deb,
problem.
what all we just said
All right,
was,
so
Mike
here's
was,
what I'll propose then, since nobody wants to listen to me today. I'll propose that Deb and Landon go through these policies, review them, and bring back their recommendation to the board. And we'll have this meeting again.
so,
Since I proposed that an hour and a half ago, I agree with that.
so Deb, what I had said when you walked out of the room, and I'm
Sorry,
okay,
I didn't mean to walk out. I just-
Fine.
2.5 hours I just needed.
you're fine. You're fine. You didn't let any of us come with you, but that's fine.
Well, you guys had a break while I was trying to set everything up.
We did. So, I'm okay with Mike doing that. My concern in going through some of these comments is that I feel like we need to be focused on what the goal of this document is and not overstep into, the building codes and the zoning that's my concern. So, I'm okay with that, Mike just brought up one about putting in like swales anytime the right of way is disturbed. I would like to know what the planning board thinks, but that doesn't sound like a bad idea, if that's a goal that we would like to have as a town. I'm sure there's some more to it than that,
There's
but
also-
like what they just did at Town Park
Right.
was a good example.
From my front yard.
So, I mean, I'm okay with
Yeah, typically the floodplain, regulations frown upon the swells, because what you want to do is not to create a freedom from obstruction.
You want to drain.
And you want those stormwater to flow through. And so whenever you create swells and then you have the roads flood, then
You got a
then I get a phone call from the public works director wanting to know why something's flooded out there.
Yeah, hey, Deb, my first job out of college,
Brianna, those swells there were great.
I'm just telling you, my first job out of school was working in the Department of Transportation, doing that stuff. And the problem is, and look, I think it's a good thing to look at, but the reality is if you create it one place, all you create is a pool for everything else to go into. So it's gotta be something, I think that Mike's talking about more, just a reasonableness standard that, look, to the extent that we can create stuff to help carry water away, we gotta be looking at it. And the question is,
We have it though.
Yeah.
We actually have it under the stormwater control section. It's already there. We already talked
anyway,
about.
I second
stormwater.
Mike's motion about meeting with them.
I mean, I do too. But I think, Deb, what do you think about that? As far as what would be the easiest way?
I don't have a problem with, getting together with Landon if Landon doesn't have a problem with that. We just got the changes, or got the email actually from Mike yesterday at 12. I've been, tied up on the CRS recertification requirements. And, I forwarded Mike's email to Landon without looking at it, because I was still tied up, and just said, hey, Landon, give me a call whenever you get a chance. Landon's schedule is, of course, as busy as everybody else's is. So we really did not have any time for the two of us to even discuss in depth any of the proposals that Mike made, so.
And I think, Deb, if you were able to take an initial pass at them and respond to some of them, a good example would be the conservation plan versus wetlands. So probably not everything would require Landon's input. There are some things I think you could say it is addressed here, or it's addressed here, or this is why it says this. If you would have the time to do that, then we could be respectful too of Landon's time. Does that sound fair? Mike, are you good with that?
I'm fine.
Any objections from the board on moving forward with that? Okay, and then what I would still suggest, and I'll look to you all for guidance on that, but if something comes out of that review that is a requested change for this document or in addition to it, when it comes back to the board, I would like to make sure the planning board has had a chance to also look at it and discuss it. Is that fair, process-wise?
It's fair process-wise, but you're looking at probably another month to 2 months turnaround.
Well, I don't think what we're doing is going to stop the CAMA review process.
It's not gonna stop the camera review process, right, Landon? It's not gonna stop the camera review process, but it's a matter of scheduling both for our workloads as well as planning board meetings. So they don't meet again until August the 19th, I think, something like that.
Would you agree that that's the best path to move forward with, or do you have a better suggestion?
I don't think that I'm prepared to comment on that specifically, because I've not had a chance
You want to take a look at it?
analyze the input, and we've received additional input from other board members as well. But I think a lot of the discussion comes from, a lot of the discussion that you're having is that you're agreeing with the same thing, but it's, and I don't mean to be rude, but it's like you're splitting hairs on things whenever it's there. And if the purpose of that land use plan is to provide policy statements and meet the requirements of Division of Coastal Management, then we've done that. I've not heard of any policy changes per se that are not covered that are either not covered or not going to be covered. But my request would be to give me the opportunity to go through, review the all of the proposed changes. And then once I do that, sit down with Landon, and if you want to go before the planning board, then we'll do that. I don't know as I'll be able to do that between now and August.
Then why don't we just look for your recommendation after you've had a chance to get through it and discuss with Landon and Mr. Benson, and then give us an update.
I mean, just real quick, so Deb, I think, I'm trying to understand, what you're saying to us is, this is a policy manual. Don't make it into an operational manual.
Bingo.
Don't make it into something that's gonna have every detail of everything we've got.
Bingo.
You have policy and you have operations, and don't try to make this one, this one, and this one, this one. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, and relative, that's a perfect analogy. One of the comments that someone made to me in relation to FEMA and floodplain regs is we all want to do higher standards and stuff, but then whenever the proverbial storm surge hits the fan, whenever the storm surge hits the fan, then it becomes, we are still struggling to this day, staff is still struggling to this day with the applications and all of the federal and state requirements and the requirements that we put upon ourselves in being able to process applications for repair and redevelopment efficiently. And so that's why I say that, you know, if we throw in a cup of reasonableness into what you're doing, then it certainly makes the process a lot easier. One of the things that I don't think that any of you would want to do, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm just saying, I don't think that any of you, any of the planning board, any of the town staff, including the manager, want to make it more difficult for someone to get back on their feet after a major storm event. And
Well said, well said.
so when you start, you know, you've got a lot of structures that are non-conforming. So when a structure is damaged or destroyed greater than 50%, we must hold them to today's standards. So all of these new policies that you come up with, then I'm going to be the pointed-headed little bureaucrat in the corner office that says, here's your denial letter.
So basically, you're telling us not to make it a possible job for us.
So Deb, can we go back to that, because I was under the impression that, when this is how I typically stated, if it's damaged more than 50% on a non-conforming lot, that they may or may not be able to rebuild after a major storm event, or just an event, like if there's a fire and it burns down to the ground.
If it burns down to the ground, then they're building a new structure that must be consistent with today's standards.
But if it can't meet the setbacks because of the lot, then they
If
can't
it's
rebuild.
if it's an oceanfront lot, and I think we've got one that that Division of Coastal Management and town staff are dealing with now, that they've far exceeded that 50% threshold, and it's obvious that they cannot meet the CAMA setback. So just as there is, if you turn in an application and I have to deny it for whatever reason, and you can't modify your plans in such a way that I can approve,
That you can meet the setbacks.
then you have to go to the board. If it's a zoning issue, you go to the board of adjustment and request a variance. They may or may not give it to you, that's not a given. And it's the same with Division of Coastal Management. In a particular instance where there's an oceanfront structure that's gone greater than 50%, and they have to meet all of today's standards, including that CAMA setback. The first step is to apply for a CAMA permit, it gets denied, and then you apply for a variance through the CRC. So there's always these,
There's a possibility, but it's not a given.
that's the administrative due process, but there's no guarantees on what the outcome will be.
Thanks, Deb.
So we're all clear on the next steps? Okay.
Motion.
Great job.
I make a
Deb. Thanks.
motion, we adjourn the
Landon,
meeting.
thank you.
Make a motion.
Oh, thank you, young.
I second.
All right, thank you, Landon, we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth,
Yes, sir.
Talk about it.
the land use plan that we want to advocate for planting of trees. How about a
just go
program to implement planting of trees?
Similar to what we do with like the seagrass, the sea oak.
Yeah.